Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we turn ancient wisdom into, well, your personal philosophical toolkit.
Yeah, I like that. A toolkit.
Today, we are cracking open a text that is, it's tiny in stature, but just gargantuan in its influence. We're talking about the Enchiridion, or the Handbook, by Epictetus.
It's such a profound choice. For something that was put together almost 2,000 years ago, it feels unnervingly modern.
It does, doesn't it?
It's like a psychological instruction manual that could have been written yesterday. It's concise, it's ruthless, and it's so practical.
Exactly. And the author's story is, I think, the first piece of context you absolutely have to have. It sets up this ultimate paradox.
Oh, absolutely.
Epictetus wasn't born into privilege. He wasn't some powerful king or a consul. He was born a slave in Hierapolis, Phrygia, around 50 AD.
And he lived a life that was just defined by physical limitation. He had a crippled leg, and the story goes it was possibly broken deliberately by his master Epictetus.
Right, and the sheer irony there is just astonishing. This man who was physically restricted, literally owned by another person, and probably in constant pain.
This is the man who found and taught the secret to being completely, unshakably free, unconquerable inside his own mind.
That irony, for me, is the entire foundation of his philosophy.
He has to be.
If the most physically restricted person in the entire Roman world can find absolute inner invincibility, what excuse do the rest of us have when we're, facing our everyday setbacks?
It's so compelling. It just forces you to confront this idea that freedom isn't an external status. It's not determined by politics or your bank account.
It's an internal state.
Exactly. It's determined by your will.
So our mission today is to explore that very path to invincibility. We've distilled his core message into 5 powerful concepts. I think of them as mental tools, really, that explain his whole roadmap. From understanding his famous dichotomy of control to how we actively train the mind, and maybe the hardest part, how we accept and handle inevitable loss.
And I think if you approach this book, this Enchiridion, not as some dusty old historical text, but literally as a philosophical toolkit, you realize you're holding the precursor to so much of modern psychological theory.
That's the key.
It's not about history, it's about technique. Epictetus' teachings, they became foundational to therapy methods centuries later because they provided actionable, structured wisdom for alleviating psychological distress.
Okay, so let's unpack that history because it really explains why we have the text in the form that we do.
Right.
Epictetus didn't just wake up one day and, start teaching stoicism. He had this rigorous training while he was still enslaved in Rome, studying under a really renowned Stoic teacher named Musonius Rufus.
And Rufus was famous for his practical, no-nonsense approach to philosophy. He really believed it should serve as a form of moral therapy. That training period under Rufus was, it was absolutely formative for Epictetus.
It instilled in him this belief that philosophy has to be a way of life, not just some abstract theory you debate.
Exactly. It has to be lived.
So he eventually gains his freedom, his manumission, probably sometime after 68 AD, after the death of Nero, and he starts teaching almost immediately in Rome. But as often happens, political stability doesn't last.
Precisely. Around 93 AD, the Emperor Domitian decides that philosophers are basically subversive troublemakers and banishes all of them from the city of Rome.
This wasn't a small thing. This was a pivotal, life-altering event for Epictetus.
Which, ironically, was probably the best thing that could have happened for his career.
Right. He relocates to Nicopolis in Greece and founds his own school. If he had stayed in Rome, who knows? His teachings might have been completely lost to history.
And that's where the second crucial character steps onto the stage. This is where our surviving records actually begin, with Arrian.
Lucius Flavius Arrianus.
Right, a wealthy Greek public servant, a talented student, and a really serious historian. He attended Epictetus' lectures around 108 AD when he was a young man.
And Arrian was just determined to capture his teacher's words verbatim, much like Xenophon had done for Socrates centuries before.
Which is why he earned the nickname the young Xenophon.
Right. He meticulously preserved these teachings, and he gave us literally everything we know about Epictetus' thought process and his methods.
And we really have to distinguish between the 2 key works that came out of this because they serve fundamentally different purposes. It's kind of like the difference between a therapist's raw session notes and a published self-help summary.
Good analogy. So first, you have the 8 books of the discourses.
Or diatribae. And these are the raw material.
The live sessions.
Yes. Arrian explicitly said these were verbatim notes of the actual lectures and the classroom interactions. Sadly, only 4 of the 8 survive today. But what's so fascinating is the style of the discourses.
They don't read like a lecture.
Not at all. They read more like transcripts of these intense, challenging group therapy sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Epictetus was very Socratic in his method. He would challenge his students, often pretty aggressively, to expose their flawed reasoning and their emotional attachments.
He wanted to shock them into self-reflection.
He did. So the discourses are dynamic, they're conversational, and often really confrontational. They show us the process of philosophy in action.
The training itself, the ascesis.
Exactly. The spiritual training. Now you contrast that with the second key work, the one we were focusing on today, the Enchiridion.
Which is like the ultimate philosophical Cliff's Notes.
It is. The Enchiridion is a short, concise compendium, the true handbook. The Latin term for a book you carry everywhere is vade megum, which means go with me.
I love that.
And that's precisely what Arian compiled this to be, a compact, easy reference summary of the core principles. Unlike the discourses, the Enchiridion doesn't show you the rough and tumble of the classroom. It just presents the conclusions.
Which explains why modern readers love it, but also maybe why they sometimes miss the rigor that's behind the advice. You get the bullet points, but not the context of the struggle.
That's a great way to put it. And it's also worth noting that scholars believe the Enchiridion drew from some original source material that might be lost now, maybe even Epictetus' own notes. So it's more than just a simple extract from the discourses we have.
It's the essential distillation.
Right. So, stepping back, what was Epictetus trying to accomplish with all this teaching? He taught that philosophy's first and most necessary topic wasn't some abstract theory like cosmology or metaphysics.
It was practical application, the doing of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the doctrine says we ought not to lie, the first focus is the action of not lying. The logical and theoretical reasons, why it's rational not to lie, that all comes later.
This emphasis is what made Stoicism such a demanding way of life. It's a training regime focused on continuous self-monitoring.
Epictetus himself called the philosopher's school an iatrion, a doctor's clinic.
That makes it sound less like a university department and more like an emergency room for the soul.
Precisely. It underscores its function as practical medicine for the soul, or animi medicina, focused entirely on identifying and alleviating the psychological distress caused by our irrational beliefs and our uncontrolled emotions. The mission was cure, not just contemplation.
Okay, that structural view of philosophy as medicine brings us perfectly to Principle 1. This is the absolute bedrock of Epictetus's entire system.
Right.
Without it, none of the other principles even make sense.
The dichotomy of control.
Yes, which we can frame with the analogy of the two ships. Imagine you have two captains, and they're sailing the same tumultuous seas.
Right.
Captain A is just fixated on the external world, the weather, the waves, the direction of the wind, whether his crew respects him, whether his cargo will fetch a good price.
Everything he can't control.
Exactly. So when the wind shifts or a big wave hits, he rages. He feels helpless, he feels disturbed, and he blames both gods and men. He has anchored his entire internal state to things happening outside of him.
Then you have Captain B.
Captain B, facing the exact same storm, understands the dichotomy of control, what you can call the stoic fork. He knows the wind is beyond his power. He doesn't waste an ounce of energy on it.
But he knows the sails, the rudder, his own judgment, and his efforts are entirely within his sphere of influence. He is continuously working on the internal variables.
This is Epictetus's fundamental distinction. It's right there in the opening lines of the Enchiridion, setting the stage for everything that follows. He says, there are things which are within our power, and there are things which are beyond our power.
And we should probably define those categories very precisely, starting with what is ours, the sails.
Let's do it.
These are our rational faculties, or what the Stoics called prohairesis.
Prohairesis.
It's the faculty of moral choice, the exercise of our will. It includes our judgments, our opinions, our aims, our desires, our aversions. These things, Epictetus assures us, are free, unrestricted, unhindered.
They are entirely our own responsibility. They can't be taken away by any tyrant or any catastrophe.
Which means prohairesis is the seat of our freedom. It's the part of us that judges. And that judgment is the only thing we are truly accountable for.
It's a radical idea.
It is. The moment you define freedom as the correct use of your prohairesis, you become immune to external oppression. Your master can chain your body, but he cannot change your judgment about the chain.
Okay, so what about the things beyond our power? The things Captain B has to accept? The weather.
That's everything external. Epictetus categorizes it pretty broadly.
Mm-hmm.
The body itself, property, reputation, office, wealth, and what other people think of you.
All the stuff we usually obsess over.
All of it. And these things, he warns, are Weak, dependent, restricted, alien. They belong to others, or to fortune, or to the universal process of nature. They are the things you have to surrender to the captain of the ship. Death or destiny when he calls.
Okay, here is where the philosophical rubber meets the road, and I have to insert a challenge here.
Please do.
If we're told to accept everything external as uncontrollable, doesn't that inherently risk a kind of passive resignation? If a slave is told his body and property are alien, doesn't that just encourage complacency with his own oppression?
That is the most frequent and I think the most compelling criticism of Stoicism. But Epictetus does not preach passive resignation. He advises effort, but, and this is key only effort, directed at what he calls preferred indifference.
Okay, we have to define that term, indifference.
Indifference are all those external things which are neither good nor bad in themselves, meaning they do not affect our moral quality, our prohairesis. This includes health, wealth, reputation, all of it.
But there's a distinction.
Yes, the Stoics recognize a subset, preferred indifference, like health, wealth, and education, and dispreferred indifference, like poverty, illness, and death.
So we should strive for the preferred ones, like health or helping others, but we have to do it with a really crucial caveat.
Yes, we strive for them because they are rational and in accord with nature, but we must always hold them lightly. Your effort, the sales, is fully within your power. The successful outcome, the weather, is not.
So if you strive for health, but you still get sick, you still succeeded philosophically.
Exactly, because you exercised virtue, effort, discipline. But if you attribute freedom to those dependent things, if you believe you must have wealth to be happy, Epictetus promises you will be hindered, you will lament, you will be disturbed, you will find fault, both with gods and men.
That sounds like modern anxiety and depression distilled into a single sentence.
It really is. You suffer because you've anchored your freedom to something you can't possibly own.
The path to freedom, then, is procured only by taking control of what is truly yours, your own will and your judgments.
And he gives a really severe caution about this. He says, if you try to seek wealth or power and inner freedom at the same time, you will certainly fail at the latter. You have to entirely quit some externals and just postpone the rest. The focus has to be singular.
It's incredible how centuries later, the American theologian Reinhold Niebuhr writes the Serenity Prayer, which is, it's basically the dichotomy of control modernized.
It is the same core engine. It just proves the universal applicability of this distinction. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Niebuhr focused on the outcome of acceptance and action.
And Epictetus focused on the philosophical mechanism behind that acceptance, understanding the nature of your own will. The foundational therapeutic implication is just crystal clear. When you're faced with some unpleasing semblance or event, the first question has to be, does this concern the things which are within my own power or those which are not?
And if it's the latter,
be prepared to say that it is nothing to you. That's the immediate deployment of the Stoic fork.
So moving from that structural principle of control to the psychological principle of reaction, we get to principle 2, changing the lens. This is often illustrated by the simple anecdote of the broken teacup. But the principle applies to any setback, really, from a minor traffic jam to a major personal betrayal.
Right. The cup breaks. The loss of the physical object is one event. It's neutral. But the suffering that follows, the rage, the catastrophic internal dialogue, the whole day being ruined, that's a separate event entirely. It's a product of our judgment.
This leads to arguably Epictetus's most famous and transformative cognitive insight. It's a phrase so powerful that Montaigne had it carved onto a beam in his library centuries later. The Greek is "taresi to setobanta itote trakpinton dokta."
The direct translation is, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of things.
And that one sentence just immediately shifts the locus of suffering. It moves it from the external event, the teacup shattering, the car getting scratched, someone insulting you,
to the internal judgment, the dogma that the event is bad, or terrible, or disaster.
So the suffering isn't inherent in the event, it's optional.
It is. Marcus Aurelius later summarized it perfectly. He said, if you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now.
The key mechanism here is the difference between an impression, a fantasia, and then giving assent to that impression.
Exactly. An event happens, say someone insults you, that registers as a primary impression. They called me an idiot. Most people immediately jump to judgment. That is terrible. I am hurt. I must be angry.
The Stoic training is designed to insert a pause right there.
A pause that allows the rational faculty, the proeresis, to inspect that impression.
So the philosophical move is to recognize the impression for what it is, just a semblance, and withhold your assent from the irrational judgment that follows.
You look at the insult and you say, you are but a semblance and by no means the real thing.
The true application here is vigilance. When you are hindered or disturbed, Epictetus instructs us to blame neither others nor ourselves, but rather our own internal views.
Right. If a friend cancels plans, the event itself is neutral. The rage you feel stems from the view. This is a personal affront. They don't value me. The Stoic corrects that view. They had an external factor interfere, and anyway, their actions are outside my control.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting for anyone listening today, because this single philosophical phrase became the absolute hallmark of modern cognitive psychotherapy.
Precisely. This is the explicit philosophical precursor for rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT, which was developed by Albert Ellis in the 1950s.
In cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, developed by Aaron Beck shortly after.
Both Ellis and Beck studied the Stoics, and they openly acknowledged this cognitive theory of emotions as their foundation.
So this is more than just a coincidence, it's a direct lineage. When a modern therapist tells a patient that their emotional distress stems from their beliefs, they are literally channeling Epictetus from 2,000 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Ellis, in particular, he stressed his ABC model. The activating event A does not cause the consequence. C, the emotional distress. Instead, it's the belief, B, about the event that causes the consequence.
And Epictetus's quote is the ultimate summary of B. It's not the pragmata, the things, the A,
but the dogmata, the views, the B that disturb us.
And the power of that realization is the immediate shift of responsibility. If the problem is my judgment, I can fix it. If the problem is the weather, I can't.
It connects directly back to principle 1. The cognitive shift is to view emotions not as these automatic, unavoidable reactions, but as the result of a cognitive judgment, a choice about whether or not to give our assent to that first emotional impression.
It places the power of remedy entirely back into our own hands.
Completely.
Okay, so if the first two principles are about what to ignore externals and how to react with judgment, principle 3 is about how we actually improve the self. And this is captured so beautifully in the analogy of the master sculptor's block.
The sculptor is chipping away at this massive block of marble. It's covered in dust and debris. The perfect statue is already inside, hidden by all the excess rock, just waiting to be revealed.
This just flips our modern notion of self-improvement on its head.
It really does.
We think of improvement as adding things, adding wealth, adding qualifications, adding a layer of superficial confidence. But Epictetus suggests true self-development is an act of removal.
It's the removal of the junk. The irrational demands, the fears, the ego, the unhealthy, excessive emotions, which the Stoics called pathy or passions.
And these passions prevent us from accessing our natural, rational self.
Exactly. And that rational nature, when it's fully expressed, is what defines true virtue, or archetu.
We absolutely have to clarify the Stoic definition of virtue, archetu, because it's such a broader concept than modern morality.
It is. Archetu literally means excellence or function. For the Stoics, virtue or excellence is the only true good, and it is entirely sufficient for leading a happy life or eudaimonia.
Human flourishing.
Right. And if virtue is the sole good, then everything else, health, wealth, reputation, all falls into that category of indifference.
This is so crucial to grasp. Why can an external misfortune, say, losing your home, not undermine your happiness?
Because the loss of a home is an external event. It's a dispreferred indifferent. It does not affect your ability to make rational judgments or to exercise moral excellence.
So since virtue, your excellence in judgment, is the only true good, your happiness, your eudaimonia, remains intact, even if your circumstances are terrible.
And that is the source of the Stoics' invincibility.
This principle, therefore, warns fiercely against external egotism. Epictetus tells us not to be elated at any excellence that isn't our own.
If you boast about a handsome horse, the praise belongs to the horse. If you boast about your wealth, the praise belongs to fortune. If you're going to be elated, be so only at your own good, which is the correct use of existence's phenomena, being in harmony with nature and reason.
He has that great line, when you wear silk, don't say, look how fine I am. Say, look how fine this fabric is.
Yes. And achieving this level of excellence, Becoming that revealed statue, it requires commitment, discipline, and substantial effort. The ascesis.
The spiritual training, he compared it directly to becoming an Olympic wrestler. It's not just intellectual contemplation, it's a physical, emotional, and mental commitment.
It really is.
So what's the price of becoming a philosopher, according to Epictetus? Because it sounds incredibly demanding.
It is. You have to submit to a rigorous diet, constant exercise, not of the body, but of the mind, and you have to commit seriously. You have to be prepared to quit your acquaintances, be despised by your servant, be laughed at by those you meet.
And if you're conquered by that ridicule,
You incur a double ridicule, first for failing to be indifferent to external insults, and second for failing to achieve the serenity you were seeking in the first place.
it sounds like a complete repudiation of a comfortable, socially integrated life. You have to cut yourself off from everything that looks towards show and luxury.
Yes, because those things are externalities, and chasing them just drains the energy you need for the internal fight. The goal is the internal purchase of serenity, freedom, and tranquility.
He really challenges the reader.
He does. He says, if you aren't willing to pay that price, the price of social awkwardness, loneliness, ridicule, then don't even start the combat. If you attempt the training, you have to be single-minded and rigorous, inspecting your mind continuously.
This really grounds the idea that Stoicism isn't just about reading a book. It's an intensely difficult regimen of self-denial and mental exercise designed to purify that ruling faculty.
It forces you to ask, what do I actually value? If you value external praise, which is absurd and different, you have to accept that you are putting your peace in the hands of other people.
But if you value virtue, the soul good.
You put your peace entirely in your own hands.
So Principle 4 addresses our relationship to the world and our position within the cosmic and social structure. It uses this powerful theatrical metaphor. Life is a drama, and we are merely actors.
And the author, Epictetus, uses terms like the universe, God, or destiny chooses the role. You might be cast as a ruler, or a cripple, or a poor man, or a private citizen. You don't get a vote on the script or the part.
And our business?
Our business is simply to act the given part well. That is where our power lies. In the quality of the performance, the effort, the moral choices you make while delivering your lines.
So if you're an actor who delivers 4 lines as a messenger with truth and dignity, you're fulfilling your function better than the king who acts arrogantly or messes up his lines.
That's the idea. And this extends to how we deal with those closest to us and our societal duties, which the Stoics called oikiosis, the process of self-affiliation or finding what belongs to us.
Our relations.
Right. Duties are universally measured by relations. Father, brother, citizen, spouse. You have a duty inherent in the role you play. If you have an unjust brother, your duty is not to force him to be just, but to preserve your own just relation toward him.
You have to focus on keeping your own will conformable to nature.
Because, crucially, another cannot hurt you unless you please.
Okay, that is a challenging statement. If someone punches me, how am I not hurt unless I please?
The physical sensation of pain or the loss of property, that's an external event, a dispreferred indifferent. It's unpleasant. But the hurt Epictetus is talking about is the moral or psychological injury, the injury to your prohairesis.
I see.
You are only morally injured when you consent to be injured. When you allow the event to trigger irrational anger or fear or a sense of injustice, the punch is external. The decision to be enraged is internal.
So when someone reviles you, when they throw abuse or insult your reputation, how should the Stoic process that interaction?
You have to remember they are speaking or acting from an impression that what they are doing is right or necessary for them. They're the one operating on a false appearance, and so they are the one who is deceived or psychologically hurt.
And the philosophical response is meekness.
You say internally, it seemed so to him. You don't make excuses for the insult, but you acknowledge that their bad behavior is a mistake of judgment on their part, and that mistake is their burden, not yours.
This requires a superhuman amount of emotional distance.
It requires intense ascesis. And this perspective clarifies the absurdity of societal hierarchy that's based on externals. He directly addresses the logical flaws of common boasts.
Statements like, I am richer than you, therefore I am your superior.
Or, I have a better office, therefore I am your superior. They're just false. The superiority resides neither in property nor in style, but entirely in the ruling faculty of the mind.
And this leads to his famous and slightly cynical analogy about the cost of externals. He argues that if you desire externals, like being preferred at a banquet or having a high office, but you refuse to pay the price for them, You're unreasonable and foolish.
He uses the example of lettuce. How much our lettuce is sold for, an obulus. If another person pays the obulus and takes the lettuce and you don't pay and go without, don't think they've gained some unfair advantage.
They have the lettuce, you have the obulus you saved.
And the freedom of not participating in that particular exchange.
So if you want high office, the price might be sycophancy, flattering a patron, attending boring functions, sacrificing your peace.
And if you are unwilling to praise the person or attend on them, you're being inconsistent. The trade-off is clear. What do you have instead of the supper or the office?
You have not having to praise whom you do not like to praise.
Not having to bear the insolence of his lackeys and preserving your own virtue. The superior bargain, for the Stoic, is always virtue and self-respect.
Okay, our fifth and final core principle focuses on the hardest part of being human, dealing with loss, mortality, and the ultimate uncertainty of fate. Epictetus gives us this really vivid metaphor of the ship at anchor.
When your ship is anchored in the harbor, you can amuse yourself ashore. You can pick up a shellfish or be granted a wife or a child, but you must never forget that your thoughts ought to be bent toward the ship and perpetually attentive.
Because when the captain calls, that is, when death or destiny calls, you have to run to the ship, leave all things, and never look behind. The external world, including your loved ones, is only on loan.
This metaphor encapsulates the radical, almost uncomfortable detachment that's necessary to maintain inner freedom. And he adds a practical, somber caveat. If you are old, never go far from the ship, because the call is likely imminent.
You have to live in constant awareness of the transient nature of everything external.
Everything.
And how do we approach loss itself? The death of a child or a spouse, the loss of property. We're encouraged to embrace the concept of loss as restoration.
You must never say, I have lost it, but I have restored it. If a child or wife dies, they are restored to nature or to the giver. If your estate is taken away, it is restored.
Even if a bad man was the one who took it, what does it matter?
Right. The giver nature, the gods, has demanded it back. While you possess anything tenderly beloved, you should hold it as something not your own, as do travelers at an inn.
I have to push back here. That sounds cold, even emotionally unnatural. Surely there's space for grief. Telling someone who has just lost a child you have restored it to nature seems like a cruel philosophical trick.
It does sound cruel from a modern perspective that's focused on emotional processing. But Epictetus is not trying to maximize comfort. He's trying to maximize moral integrity and prevent pathe, that excessive suffering.
His goal is to inoculate us.
Exactly. To inoculate us against the catastrophe of believing the loss of an external good has destroyed our internal good, our virtue. The exercise is anticipatory. By internalizing that nothing is truly ours, the blow of inevitable loss is cushioned.
This detachment requires an active mental tool that the Stoics relied on heavily, premeditation of adversity or premeditatio malorum.
This is the proactive mental exercise of anticipating hardships. It's not about pessimism, it's about preparation. Epictetus encourages us to let death and exile and all other things which appear terrible be daily before your eyes, but death chiefly.
Can you give us a concrete example of this daily practice beyond just contemplating death?
Sure. When you kiss your child, remind yourself that they might die tomorrow. When you put on your cloak, remind yourself that it might be stolen today. When you sit down for a meal, remind yourself that you may lose your appetite or be exiled before you finish.
The rationale being?
The rationale is that if you contemplate death daily, you will never entertain an abject thought, nor to eagerly covet anything. You strengthen your spirit against the unexpected weight of disaster by making the disaster expected.
So we train ourselves not to be surprised by calamity. But what about when we see others grieving? We can't just stand there emotionally flatlining.
Epictetus is very practical here, addressing the social reality of grief. When you see another person weep over a lost child or property, you should accommodate your conversation to them. He says, groan with them if needed. You perform the social ritual of sympathy. You must take heed, however, not to groan inwardly too.
That distinction, groans outwardly but not inwardly, is perhaps the most difficult piece of advice in the whole Enchiridion.
It is the ultimate boundary setting. You recognize their pain, but you guard your own ruling faculty, remembering that what truly hurts them is their view of the event, not the event itself.
If you groan inwardly, you have given your assent to the judgment that the external loss is a true catastrophe.
And you have compromised your own invincibility.
The ultimate acceptance is stated so clearly in the book. Demand not that events should happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and you'll go on well.
When you wish events to happen as they do, You are aligning your will with the whole will of nature or destiny which governs the universe. That alignment is the definition of achieving a good flow of life, euthymia, and going on well. It's the ultimate active measure of self-mastery.
Taking control of your judgment to harmonize with cosmic fate.
Exactly.
We've traveled through Epictetus's toolkit, and what you realize that these aren't just historical doctrines, they're practical psychological techniques. We mentioned earlier the Hellenistic schools viewed philosophy as iatrion, a doctor's clinic, or animi medicina, medicine for the soul.
Yes. The focus was psychological triage. And the connection to modern therapies like CBT is just undeniable, with both Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck explicitly citing stoicism as their philosophical source.
So let's detail some of the modern therapeutic techniques that are directly rooted in Stoic practice.
Okay. Starting with that uncertainty principle, the idea that outcomes are not entirely up to us.
Right.
That leads directly to the Stoic method of reserve clauses, or exceptio. This is the technique of reminding oneself that events will unfold outside our power. Seneca advised that the wise man weighs certainty of purpose against uncertainty of result.
So a modern application would be using phrases like, I'll try my best, barring any unforeseen events.
Or just using a mental caveat. I intend to succeed, but if external factors prevent it, my virtue remains intact.
Yeah.
It's preemptive management of disappointment, really. It protects your ego and your moral choice.
It prevents you from equating a failed outcome, which is uncontrollable, with a failed effort, which is controllable.
Exactly. Another technique that flows directly from that broken teacup principle is cognitive distancing and decatastrophizing.
That's the separation of the self from the negative judgment.
By acknowledging that our emotions are primarily due to our beliefs, our dogmata, we gain psychological distance from the immediate emotional reaction. This prevents us from judging adverse external events, like a job loss or a natural disaster, as absolutely catastrophic in a moral sense.
This is fundamental CBT work, challenging those automatic negative thoughts, the ANTs.
It is. And then you have the recent very popular trend of mindfulness. Where does that overlap with Epictetus?
Good question.
It aligns perfectly with the Stoic spiritual exercise of attention, or proso. It literally translates as concentration on the present moment or mindfulness. Both Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius stressed that true unhappiness comes from not observing the movements of our own minds.
So prososh isn't just passive meditation, it's active self-monitoring. What is the Stoic mind actually looking for when it's practicing proso?
It's continuous guard duty. The Stoic is watching for the first unexamined impression, the fantasia that enters the mind, ready to challenge it before it hardens into a judgment, a dogma.
By focusing on the present moment, we guard our minds against unhealthy feelings rooted in the past, like regret or depression, or in the future, like anxiety.
Right. The past and future are outside our control, but the present moment is where we practice virtue.
The modern relevance is just striking, especially when you map the 4 surviving primary sources of Roman Stoicism onto contemporary therapy structures. It suggests the ancients had this well-developed multimodal approach to psychological wellness.
Oh, for sure. Seneca's letters to Lucilius are like individual mentoring, kind of like individual psychotherapy.
Right.
Epictetus's discourses, as we said, are group dialogues and workshops, mirroring group therapy sessions where the philosophy is tested through challenge.
And Epictetus's Enchiridion is the concise, principle-based summary, serving as a classic self-help manual or textbook.
And finally, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is his private journal of contemplation and exercises, which is effectively an early therapy journal or workbook.
That's a holistic system. Now let's look at one of the newest applications. Its relevance in neuropsychiatry. That sounds like a fascinating bridge between ancient philosophy and modern physical medicine.
It is, because Stoic-derived CBT interventions are proving really effective in managing chronic neuropsychiatric conditions, like Tourette's syndrome and Parkinson's disease.
Conditions that involve both motor and non-motor symptoms, both of which are largely external to the patient's conscious will.
Right. And as we discussed, those non-motor symptoms, the anxiety, the depression, often impact a patient's quality of life even more deeply than the motor features themselves.
So how does it work with Tourette's syndrome?
Patients often experience these premonitory urges before a tic. When a tic inevitably happens, the patient can catastrophize, judging the tic as a failure or a disaster. Stoic-derived CBT targets those maladaptive beliefs about the discomfort and their ability to cope.
It teaches them to view the physical urge or the tic as an external, uncontrollable event.
But their response to the event as controllable. They're using the dichotomy of control to manage an involuntary physical reality. They can't control the tick, but they can control the judgment about the tick.
By reframing the tick from a catastrophe to a dispreferred indifferent, the anxiety and affective symptoms are reduced.
Exactly, which often has the side effect of reducing the enhatic frequency itself. And it's similar for Parkinson's patients who are dealing with the anxiety and depression that stems from a progressive physical decline. CBT helps them focus on preserving their moral faculty, their prohairesis, realizing that the excellence of their mind remains untouched by the decline of their body.
The core idea remains the same. The Stoic principle helps patients manage their internal response to uncontrollable external physical realities, whether that reality is a shattered teacup or an involuntary motor symptom.
Exactly.
We absolutely have to acknowledge that when Epictetus was teaching and Arian was compiling all this, the text was not politically neutral in its social context.
Oh, not at all.
The Enchiridion was explicitly intended for a male audience, reflecting the patriarchal Roman society.
And that's clear in the language. Epictetus repeatedly refers to the reader's wife and children, assuming the student is a male head of a household. He has only one section devoted to acceptable conduct for women, which is basically advising men to praise female modesty, to value them for more than their domestic roles.
It aims to reinforce behavior, not challenge the underlying power structure.
Not in the slightest.
And yet, the very core principle, finding freedom by accepting circumstances you cannot control, is extremely powerful when it's applied to systemic oppression. How did this text become so instrumental in debates about oppression and liberation far outside its original intended audience?
Well, the central philosophical idea is pliable. In the late 17th century in England, the Enchiridion was translated and it was widely read, and its teachings on acceptance were deployed in two drastically different ways regarding women's status.
The first, the oppressive use, focused on complacency.
Correct. Writers in the sphere of John Dryden and John Evelyn used Epictetus's teaching on accepting power differentials to justify female subordination. The argument was, your status is external, therefore accept your role as subservient to your husband or father without complaint. Preserve your virtue through quiet endurance.
The goal was to encourage complacency with the status quo.
Exactly. But then you have figures like Mary Chudley, who took the exact same text and used it for liberation, which is a brilliant reversal.
It is.
Mary Chudley was a highly published poet, and she was actively enraged by sermons that were demanding female submission. She used the Enchiridion as a tool to question male authority.
How so?
She encouraged women to cultivate a confident and positive way of thinking about themselves, their inner citadel, and find fulfillment in their mindset, independent of external circumstances or the authority of men.
She found her prohairesis. She recognized that her freedom lay in her judgment, which no man to touch.
She used the slave philosopher's words to fight her own systemic constraints, and that's the power of the text.
This idea just echoes forward into the modern era, particularly in social advocacy.
And the connection became even more explicit in the 1970s with Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American woman in Congress.
Who cited Epictetus, the slave philosopher, directly. She made that connection between personal mastery and political freedom.
She did. She wrote an article focusing on the intersectionality of racial and gender discrimination. She used Epictetus's origin story to underscore the theme of common oppression and cited that powerful quote, "No man is free until he is master of his own mind."
She connected this idea to the necessity for African Americans and women to build that internal strength and understand their common oppression in order to achieve political progress.
It's fascinating. Whether or not Epictetus ever intended his words to fuel these movements, his core idea that freedom is internal mastery, independent of external constraints, is universally applicable to anyone facing systemic injustice.
It allows the text to be reread as a manual for liberation rather than just resignation.
That's the definition of an enduring philosophical work, isn't it? Its ability to transcend its original narrow context and become a resource for entirely new struggles.
So we've walked the path to the inner citadel. Epictetus, the crippled slave, built a fortress of the mind based on 5 simple tools. Mastering the dichotomy of control, prohairesis, changing the lens of judgment, dogmata, achieving inner transformation through removal, ascesis, mastering the role fate assigned us, and embracing that radical detachment from loss, premeditatio malorum.
And his work flourished during the Hellenistic Age, an era that was characterized by the fragmentation of the stable Greek city-state. This led to immense societal uncertainty.
And that situation drove philosophers toward introspection, towards the pursuit of inner liberty when external certainty just vanished.
It makes perfect sense that Stoicism is experiencing such a massive resurgence today.
It really does. The sociologist Zygmunt Bauman called our current era one of liquid modernity, where the external world jobs, climate, politics, technology is constantly shifting and unstable.
And Stoicism offers that stable internal framework when everything external feels completely turbulent.
These values of self-mastery and inner freedom, they become profoundly valuable when the external world provides no certainty.
Indeed. But this raises an important question for you, the learner, to mull over. And it connects Epictetus' original warning to modern practice.
The provocative thought. Hit us with it.
Epictetus consistently advised that a philosopher should not desire to be a general or a consul, but simply to be free. Now, considering the widespread modern reliance on Stoic techniques, often adopted through CBT, self-help manuals, performance coaching, the primary goal today is often to improve work performance, reduce stress, and seek professional success.
All external measures. Preferred indifference.
Exactly. So the question is, are we truly seeking the Stoic goal of freedom today? Or have we simply adopted Stoicism as a better, more resilient way to conquer the weather that Epictetus warned us was ultimately uncontrollable?
That's a powerful thought to anchor to the next time you find yourself trying to master your sails, only to realize you're still trying to steer toward an external outcome that may never be truly yours. Remember, success and virtue is always available, regardless of the outcome.
Keep practicing pro-soc. Keep watching your judgments.
And we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.